wake up, hit 100 push-ups, then I'm at my route. Check on my stocks, see how they looking, then I'm sliding out. When you start seeing your progression, you stop having doubts. And what's the point of having clout if you can't cash it out? True to this game, and I'm a lifer, ayy. Feel like we finna change the cycle, ayy.
Welcome back, wealthy people. Welcome back. It's another beautiful episode of the Black Wealth Renaissance podcast. It's your boy, your man's David Bellard, one half of Black Wealth Renaissance crew. I'm here with my brother from another, Jalen. What's on with you?
What's up, my brother? I am beautiful, black-tastic, awesome, handsome, all of those things, man. I'm feeling amazing.
Let's go,
How you
huh?
doing,
That's how you feeling. You
Yes,
got that
sir.
good energy today,
Yes,
man.
sir,
It's a good
man.
Sunday, you know what I'm saying? I feel
Yeah,
it.
Sunday I went to church. I got some good word in me, man. And then I had some good fellowship with actually a listener of the pod. We shouted him out before, Swamp Doc. I actually met him in person,
shout out,
man.
Eric.
Yeah, that was cool, man. Mr. Eric, I didn't want to dox him like that, but yeah.
Hey, that's the first name, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that was pretty cool, man. It was really, really great, man. How you doing?
Man, I'm doing fantastic, bro. It's been a chill weekend. Got a little OT, got some grills, some chill. And now I'm having an amazing conversation about some stuff that we've been touching on over the last few weeks. And we got an expert in the room this time, guys.
Yes, sir.
Because we need to have these conversations. I'm all for the breadth and us being able to touch things. But I like to get that depth too. And we understand we ain't the foremost experts on things. So we got a special treat for y'all today. And I'm excited about it. But before I intro today's guest, y'all know what we got to do. I need y'all to leave us that 5-star rating and review.
We
It
need
continues
that.
to help us grow the show and continue to touch and impact people like yourself who are on their journeys to building and maintaining wealth. Yes, indeed. So, Jalen, man, give me a drum roll, man. Let's get it, man.
I got you. Hold on, man. Hold on.
Yeah. So, look, without further ado, y'all, we got another great guest on the show, friend of the show. You may know him for his work and the references we've given in the space of financial trauma, specifically as it affects the Black community. We have none other on today than Mr. Rakim Sabree, accredited financial consultant, financial coach, financial therapist, is helping actively address the root cause of people's problems with money so that you can build and maintain wealth. Rakim, man, welcome back to the show. We so glad to have you back, brother.
I'm glad to be back, man. I'm glad to be back.
Yes, sir. I know pre-show we were talking about when was the last time you was on. We go find it. It was around April of 2020, man. So I know a lot of things have changed since then.
Yeah, man, a little over 5 years.
Yes, sir. So what we're going to do is we just going to get right into this, man. For anybody who hasn't listened to that previous episode, if y'all want to, y'all can check it out. But can you just give us a brief intro of who you are and how you kind of got to this current point where you're at?
For sure. So Rahkim Sabree, I am a accredited financial counselor and financial therapist. My focus is on financial trauma almost exclusively. How did I get here? Man, it's been a journey. So if we're going back to April 2020, I was still working for the bank. I was in banking. And I think that conversation centered around banking and
It did, actually.
financial literacy. I think I talked about the nonprofit that I had at the time.
Yes, sir.
Fast forward 2020, May 2021, I left the bank. So I did 10 years in the banking industry and experienced some things around building my brand that were uncomfortable. So I saw the writing on the wall. My manager started questioning me, like, why are you doing all of these things? Like, I was doing the podcast, I was doing the publications, I started speaking at conferences, and it was just kind of like, you got to pick, right? So I felt bullied in that environment, and I said, I'm out. Like, I'm gonna do my own thing, and it was very loud. I wrote an article about it for Business Insider. I wrote an article about it for the Griot and for Entrepreneur, and those went viral. I ended up on Tamron Hall's show talking about it. I mean, there were so many things, huge ripple effects based off of just that public departure. And as a result, my following grew significantly because people were like, whoa, like this dude left his job in the middle of COVID. Like, what's going to happen? And so during that period of time, I think this is really important. I was figuring out what it meant to be an entrepreneur in an era where entrepreneurship was like super trendy, right? Everybody was trying to be their own boss. Everybody was, dipping and dabbling in different things. One corner of social media, you have people talking about vending. Another corner of social media, you have people talking about options.
The golden age of social media hustles.
Yeah,
Yes.
man. There's so many things, and one of the things that I'm proud of in hindsight is that I didn't allow all of those distractions to deviate me from my path. Like I really doubled down on the financial empowerment piece and ultimately discovering financial trauma as the vocabulary to describe what I was talking about. Since then, I've gotten affiliated with some professional associations. So the Financial Therapy Association, the Association for Financial Counseling and Planning Education, and then just really started to grow my expertise in a meaningful way, right? So with these credentials professionals and not just from social media hype, uh, being able to support my work and my thesis, if you will, around financial trauma with evidence-based practices, research, presenting it in front of academic crowds, not necessarily looking for validation, but getting the validation of those peers in academic spaces and realizing like, hey, this is not just like a phase, right? And so now, almost 5 years in, financial trauma is a thing. Everybody's talking about it, but I definitely remember a time where I couldn't find anybody else talking about it.
I
So
remember a time where the concept of financial empowerment, like I mentioned at the beginning, you introduced us to that concept. And then financial trauma, that's the reason anytime we bring the term up, I'm going to give credit where it's due. Like, this is the man that I know that started the
That I first
conversation.
heard that conversation from.
yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So yeah, I mean that's the general kind of like broad stroke of the situation. I think when we first connected, my branding referred to me as a financial coach. And then these days because I'm so involved in the financial therapy world, my branding refers to me as a financial therapist. But really, I mean, when you get to the core of the work, whether I'm calling myself a coach, a consultant, a financial therapist, my goal and the impact of my work is really to help people examine their relationship with money. Not only examine, but examine and improve their relationship with money, specifically with a trauma informed and trauma responsive framework. So, if I understand what are the sources of trauma specifically related to money, how trauma shows up in my body, how that impacts behavior, particularly when it comes to whether or not we save, whether or not we spend, how we invest, all of the trends that we see on social media, then I can make more informed decisions about, first of all, establishing safety within my body, and then how that projects out into the subsequent behaviors by way of building community, by way of getting educated, by way of sharing what it is that I know with other people. So it's been as much a journey of personal healing as it has been a journey of healing for the people that I engage with. But it's something that I'm super grateful for, being able to be in this space and being able to establish somewhat of longevity around the topic.
Hey, man, listen,
I love
5 years is a major, major accomplishment. Most businesses, as we know, they go out of business, and 90% of businesses are out of business in the first 5 years. So the fact that you have maintained in this space is no small feat. And before we move into really diving deep into financial trauma, I kind of want to get some of your personal experience for the listeners who didn't get a chance to hear that first episode, right? Because that first time around, you got to share a lot about, your personal upbringing and how that created some of those financial traumas. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on some of these experiences and how those insights help shape your approach to addressing, the systemic barriers and emotional responses people have to their finances.
Yeah, great question. So I grew up in Mount Vernon, New York. My parents were young parents, and they separated probably in my mid to early teens. So when my parents separated, my dad was no longer in the household. I, being the oldest of my mom's children, stepped up, as I think is frequently the case, right? Um, and I love that you asked this question because I'm gonna make reference to a realization that I share in my book. But in stepping up, what that looked like was becoming conscious of the financial environment, right? So I became aware of the fact that we had food stamps. I became aware of the fact that we had Section 8. I would see, if there was an eviction notice put on the door, I would see that and, triage with my mom. What does this mean? Try to kind of like keep it a secret from my siblings. And what I realized in that time period was I was internalizing the shame associated with witnessing that as a personal failure. Even though I had no control of the situation, I was internalizing that shame as personal failures, as I think most people do when it comes to some of these flashpoint financial experiences. And so when I first shared the story with you, and even going back to 2019 when I did my TEDx talk and I talk about like this experience, I didn't have the vocabulary to describe financial trauma. I just knew that at that point, and when I say that point, I'm talking about sharing with you all that I had accomplished something in my mind that was major, and that was a mindset shift. So I went from believing that as a child who knew that we had Section 8 in the house, I was going to become an adult and I was going to go out and do the same thing, to at 26 years old purchasing a multifamily property and had no concept of home ownership before that. So the mindset shift then resulted in a change in what my environment looked like, right? So I own a home at under 30, and in hindsight, huge blessing, right? Because in today's market, it's really difficult for people to even afford to buy a home. So I was very vigilant about making that happen once I got the exposure to the fact that it was even possible. So I'll pause there because I think like that's a lot, and in framing those kind of painful experiences around money, the realization that I had while I was writing my book, because I had a conversation with my father about it, was he says to me, that wasn't the reality over at my house. So what you experienced with the food stamps, with the Section 8, like that's not what was going on my side. And my younger brother, my immediate younger brother, was living with my dad part-time. And so I had the conversation with him as I was writing the book. I was like, do you remember like this time where, the lights would go out, or, the eviction notices, or there was no hot water? My brother was like, yo, like, I knew what was going on, but like that wasn't my reality because I was over at dad's.
He said, I just went to dad's house.
And so when I talked to my dad about it, he kind of positioned it in a way that I had to like kind of like take a step back and be like, ouch. He goes, a lot of what you experienced was your choice. Like you could have came and stayed with me. You decided you wanted to be with your mom. Like, damn.
Damn.
Like,
damn. That is okay. So I do want to pause right there. That was heavy. That was heavy right there. So I like the fact that you went like from what it sounds like the process of you making this book. Did you interview your dad for the book? Because that's kind of like
I did not interview him, but he was very involved in the background as I'm surfacing some of these ideas because, as I'm talking about trauma, whether it be through the lens of financial trauma or generalized trauma, I think it would be very hypocritical of me to talk about it from an academic perspective without doing my own work, right? So a big part of writing this book was working through the trauma that I had from childhood and, relational trauma with both parents. And some of the realizations as coming into manhood and what some of these ideas that I may have held in defense of my mother, in opposition to my father. And like, how do we reconcile this as a 30-plus-year-old when these experiences were occurring in my teenage years?
Because they still play out in the way you interact with certain situations, because that your history informs your response.
Absolutely.
I think that's really, really good. I like the fact that you also brought up you and your brother had drastic realities, and the fact that your dad is basically saying, hey, that's your fault, because although, yes, it is your fault because you decided to stay with your mom, but you also, I'm pretty sure there was a part of you that felt like, I don't want to leave my mom and allow her to face this by herself as well, especially being the oldest son, because I'm the oldest son as well. So I understand that connection that you have with your mom being the older son. You feel like if you see there's a gap, you're the person who needs to bridge that gap or make up for the lack of that, especially whenever you got younger siblings. Because now, as you're growing up, your mom is telling you, hey, you're the example. I'm counting on you to show your siblings, not just to be the man. I'm counting on you to show your siblings the path forward, right? So now it's like you're in this paradigm or this paradox where it's like, man, I don't want to disappoint my mom. I still want to be myself, but then I also got to look out for my siblings as well. So it's a lot, and I can understand how trauma would compound on that.
For sure.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I was the older person where I took the other route where whenever I saw things were getting bad, I'm not gonna lie to you. I had two amazing grandmothers in my life, so sometimes I would literally go to my grandmother because I have that same reality where lights were getting cut off sometimes, right? And sometimes my siblings, they weren't at home, but they might have been with a babysitter or something like that. And I've had to face that trauma myself. I've had to have that conversation with my mom, like, hey, I forgive you because I understand that where you were in life is totally different. And just whenever I reflected at the point, she gave birth to me whenever she was 23. I remember whenever I was 23, I thought about it. I was like, damn, my mom was dealing with a kid. I'm out here partying, smoking, and trying to get some ass, quite frankly.
Yep.
Like, how can I imagine having to provide someone at this age?
100%.
So, and that just released a lot of that trauma for me. Whenever I really kind of like just thought about it from that viewpoint, I was like, I can't hold that against her when I understand what it's like to be in that position now. Like, you want to have fun, you want to do these certain things, but you're also faced with that responsibility.
Yeah. There's two things I just want to really quickly address. So one is, and it's just phrasing, but I feel like it's important to acknowledge. My dad didn't tell me that was my fault. Mm-hmm. What he said was it was my choice.
I'm glad you brought that back because I want to get into that word choice. I feel like it's a very important concept to dive into here.
And he shared as well that when I started socializing this whole experience, that it was painful for him because, of course, as a father, like, you don't want to see your child struggle. But again, it was my choice, and I think there's a dynamic, and it's often not discussed, right, in popular culture, and particularly within the Black community, what that dynamic of a healthy relationship looks like between the young bull and the old bull, right? The dad and the son. And part of that is because systematically, whichever is the correct phrasing, fathers have been removed from their sons' lives. And so I've never had the experience of not having my father, but I have had an experience of a period of time where he and I didn't see eye to eye. And in that period of time where I had maybe assumed or internalized anger that my mom had towards him as my own, I did not recognize that I was carrying somebody else's burden. And so the second point that I wanted to make in response to that is, as much, Jalen, to your point, as much as I wanted to protect and defend my mom because of my position as her first child, as the oldest child, I was also socialized from my father to protect my mom and defend my mom. So when you talk about the complexity of the dynamic that takes place, right? So much of my upbringing prioritized protect your mother, protect your mother, protect your mother, defend your mother. And that messaging was like hard coded into who I was, even if the response or the individual or the entity or the threat that I was perceiving to my mom was him. And so
That's deep.
Yeah. And so in that reality during that period of time, I didn't even view that choice as a choice. And so his follow-up statement to that statement, as I'm like kind of like recoiling from like that was your choice, was, but maybe you had to go through that experience so that you could be the voice to talk about this for people who don't have a choice. Right? And whatever, right? Like it's not whatever, but there's so much there where I had to kind of reconcile, like, damn, like did I have to walk this path for the benefit of other people? Like, I don't think anybody ever feels good about having to go through something that's challenging and they not be the one to benefit from it. And I'm not going to say and pretend that certainly there's been benefits, right? I've gotten accolades, I've gotten awards, I've gotten credentials and cemented myself as an expert in this space. But behind all of like the things that shine and glisten, right? There is a trial that I've had to overcome. And that trial is not just financial, right? That trial is not just educational. It's psychosocial, it's familial, it's cultural. And so when we talk about financial empowerment, or we talk about financial trauma, or we talk about what generational wealth looks like, and we can dig into that term a little bit later too, we have to acknowledge all of the non data pieces, right? Where it's just numbers on a page, or information pieces where it's just like, okay, this is how you do that. A plus B equals C. And look at a lot of the qualitative data that is our experience and our programming.
That's
When it comes
good,
to
man.
interacting with money.
That's so good because, like, whenever you bring up the concept of choice, right? And I think this is where the idea of financial empowerment is so pivotal because we do have choices, even though we have, our traumas and uh, our different wiring from our upbringing and our different experiences. We do have choices at the end of the day, and the ability to recognize that is very empowering. Like, hey, yeah, it may have been this way for the last 10, 15 years, but I can start today and I can start saving money. I say one thing, just brief, and my older sister, terrible saver my whole life, like never saved money. And after she turned 40, my mom kind of got on her ass like, yo, what are you doing? You're 40. And now she saves her money and she's happier for it. She has better experiences because of it. You're not stuck in doing the same things all the time now because you've changed some habits, and you always had the choice and ability to do so. But a lot of times we let our beliefs in our own mental cages keep us in the same place. So I want to get deeper into financial trauma, right? Because it's a term people on the show, they've heard us talk about it. We've kind of mentioned it a few times in here, but I would like to ask you, Rakim, uh, can you define financial trauma and like break down what are like some of the key components of it?
Yeah, I love this question because as I've kind of searched around, most people when they talk about financial trauma, they don't give a definition. They speak to what it can be referred as, or what refers to financial trauma. Financial, like if you go do a Google search, what is financial trauma right now, you might see a definition that says financial trauma refers to dot dot dot, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a definition that I've been using since I want to say maybe earliest 2022. And so my definition of financial trauma is any instance observed or experienced that has a negative impact on the way you view, interact or believe about money, right? Um, what is groundbreaking about that definition is that previous iterations of definitions or references to financial trauma only speak to first person experiences, right? You experienced an eviction, you experienced a job loss, you went into debt or had a bankruptcy. These are experiences that you have had directly. And so a lot of times people will describe these major experiences as financial trauma. When I talk about financial trauma through a lens of any instance observed or experienced, then we bring in vicarious forms of trauma, right? So that is, I am a child witnessing my parents' financial trauma and internalizing what it is that I saw as my own, right? That's going to influence how I behave with money. We can talk about generational trauma and genetic generational trauma, right? So there's a field of study known as epigenetics that is emerging, and in epigenetic studies, it speaks to the way that genes are expressed. And so early researchers on epigenetics specifically focused on survivors of the Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, there was some documentation that referenced, I believe that the researcher's name was Vivian Rakoff, referenced how psychosis was present in the children of victims of the Holocaust, even though they did not experience it, in a way that their parents did not demonstrate it. And so this was behavioral. It wasn't, excuse me, it wasn't necessarily speaking to genetics. And so there was a researcher that followed up Rakoff's work named Rachel Yehuda. And Rachel Yehuda was able to prove that there was a connection between the way that genes are expressed based off of factors that include external factors like trauma, like stress, and also internal factors. So like, what your environment looks like, whether or not you smoke, what you eat, whether or not you drink alcohol, et cetera, was key. And I don't want to get too sciencey here, but was key to acknowledge in the study of epigenetics is that your genes are not changing. It's the expression of the genes that's changing, right? So the structure of your gene is the same, but how it is expressed changes. And so there are branches of science that focus on, for example, nutrition through the lens of epigenetics, where we may look at, I'll just use the Black community as an example. We may look at the occurrence of heart disease, high blood pressure,
Oh,
diabetes.
it runs in my family.
Exactly. Where that statement is not entirely untrue, but it's not entirely true, right? Because the survival or adaptive, I'm butchering this word, adaptive responses to stress, to a lack of resources, to food deserts, to how soul food has developed by way of what we were afforded during that time period, right? The scraps of the animal, or what was inexpensive, has then changed the way that genes are expressed so that we now are more inclined to those forms of disease.
I see exactly. Like you're genetically predisposed, but I think the genetic predisposition definitely has a lot to do with the behavioral disposition. You
It's
said soul food,
right. And
right?
so
And I think about that movie all the time, bro, because on soul food, Big Mama got diabetes and she dies because all the food they say, hey, you got to stop eating like this. They go back, eat Sunday dinner, eat the same thing. And then when she died, everybody's surprised and they go eat the same thing. It's like at one point or another, we have to recognize that we have the choice of our behaviors, and it's hard to break away from your programming, your wiring. But at one point or another, we have to become cognizant of it because, like, we already know we predisposed. I think about that with my own personal health journey, right? I'm a larger man. I come from a family, diabetes, high blood pressure, very common things, heart disease. People in their 60s, 70s, that's usually how they pass. You don't know many big dudes in their 60s, 70s. I'm predisposed. So what does that mean? I have to make choices now in my 30s that'll serve me in my 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yep.
If I want to make it that far. Otherwise, I'm going to get destroyed by what I'm predisposed to.
And a lot of times, I think this is a part of the conversation that's often not had, and so we're taking it a little bit deeper. And I'll tie it back to financial trauma in a second. A lot of times, these responses are survival based, right? So our brain's number one focus function rather is our safety, to establish safety, and whatever that looks like. So when we look into the neurobiology of survival mode, as it's often referred to, a lot of times when you talk about choice, a lot of times we are not in control of those responses because our brain does not have the ability to distinguish between a real or imagined threat, right? So real or imagined threat, our brain is going to react in the same way, which subsequently is going to have this chain reaction and how our body responds to it. So when we talk about some of the symptoms of being in that flight or fight mode, right? Increase adrenaline, increase respiration, your heart rate goes up. You are gearing up, you are preparing to either fight your way out of the situation or run away from the situation. In instances where you can't run away or you can't fight, a lot of times you might freeze, like due to indecision. And then there's a fawning response, which speaks to it's kind of like a people pleasing behavior. It's like, how do I kind of like nice my way through this? When we look at these evolutionary responses in relation to like epigenetics or in relation to money specifically, sometimes the way that we try to regulate our nervous system and come out of this fight or flight mode is by doing things that rationally would be harmful, right? So we know that eating that extra piece of cake is not going to do good. We know that drinking and smoking is not going to do any good. But our bodies also feel regulated when we are allowing ourselves to indulge in the dopamine, right? So the cake makes us feel good, right? The sugar in the cake, it increases the dopamine response. Watching TV, not that there's anything wrong with watching TV, but like social media, the biggest dopamine like supplier right now. We're constantly looking for ways to regulate our nervous system from this place of dysregulation. And so one of the arguments that I surface, I know I'm jumping around a lot, but one of the arguments that I surface when I talk about financial trauma is, in addition to the personal responsibility, we have to make better choices. We also have to point back to the systems that are triggering this dysregulation, right? And so it is big business to keep a population of people dysregulated or separated from their body. And so in acknowledging, or rather in recognizing trauma, we have to recognize that trauma is not just a psychological event, but it's a body event. And that we hold that trauma in our body in different ways, in different places. And if we're looking at generational trauma, or the trauma that our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and so on have experienced and have not metabolized or addressed, that trauma is something that we still carry in our bones as well. And so we come into this world dysregulated, and then we're constantly being dysregulated by way of design, by way of the advertisements that we consume, by way of financial socialization, by way of culture and how culture is defined, by way of religious practices, family, the systems that we navigate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Unraveling the traumas or the different sources of trauma that we experience in general and specific to money is can feel like an undertaking that is impossible. And so when you talk about choice, it's a powerful word, as you said, because yes, we have the choice to decide better, but a lot of times, based off of the way that we are responding to our need to survive or our need to regulate a dysregulated state, we often do not or cannot see the choices that are present in front of us.
That's a good, really good point that you made, because that was something I wanted to talk about, was the choice. A lot of times, sometimes people don't even know that they have that choice. Like, oh, I didn't know that was even an option. Maybe for you, right? Maybe whenever you're growing up, you didn't even realize the choice was, hey, just go to dad's house for the weekend, or just go to dad's house for the next 2 weeks. Sometimes we don't know that is a choice if we don't have that exposure. So I'll let you answer that, and then after that, I do have a follow-up question for that. So I'll let you answer that question about the choice, or if you have any other remarks regarding it.
Yeah, I just think, as you're saying what you're saying, that sometimes, and people get caught up in their own way. There's a study that I reference in the book where, and I forget. Oh, actually, there's two studies that I reference in the book. There's one around learned helplessness, which is a big one, right? So there's a study done, a psychological study done where these dogs were in cages, and the floor that they would stand on would be shocked. And so because the dogs were locked in these cages and the floor would be shocked, they couldn't do anything. And so you talk about the evolutionary response of freeze, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. In that space, the dogs would freeze. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't get out. After this part of the experiment, the doors were opened, and new dogs were introduced to the cages. with some of the old dogs. The floor was electrified. The new dogs that had not experienced previously being locked up would run out of the cage. The old dogs that had previously been locked up during the shock would stay there, even though the door was open. Right. And so this experiment, I forget what the exact title was, but it speaks to learned helplessness. If we apply that to people, a lot of people who are navigating this experience of learned helplessness. So even though the door is wide open, they can't bring it, or I'm not gonna say that they can't. Can't is not the word.
But they
learn they
won't do it.
not to move forward because previously they were barred from moving forward, right?
In the name of self-preservation.
Well, in this particular instance, it was because the door was closed, right? So they just sat there and they dealt with it because they didn't have no other choice. But because they learned that no matter what I do in this particular situation, I'm not going to get away from this shock, so I'll just deal with it. When the doors was open, they just sat there and they just dealt with it. So that's one study. Second study I want to reference was around these mice. So there were two groups of mice. One group that was nesting in an environment that was warm, that was loving, that was, for all practical intents and purposes, like healthy. And then there was another group of mice that were in like cold, damp, not favorable conditions. The mice would go out to play, and then there was the introduction of something that startled them. And so in the startling of those mice, both groups of mice ran back to home. Right? And I'm oversimplifying it. There's more details to it, but both groups of mice go back to home. And the conclusion that the researcher in that particular instance came to was that scared animals return home, regardless of the conditions of home. Right? So you have the group of mice that have come from the quote unquote good home, and you have the group of mice that came from the not good home. But when both groups of mice were startled, both groups of mice went back to their home, even if it was unfavorable. And so going to your question, or to the point around recognizing that my dad's house was a viable option for me. When I look at those two studies and I think about the learned helplessness, the socialization that I had, right, to protect and defend my mom, what had become my sphere of normality, right? So school, friends, what was normal to me. Making the choice to leave my mom's house to go to my dad's house was like an impossible choice. Like it wasn't even something that conceptually I could even embark on. I want to take this out of the lens of my experience as a teenager, though. Look at the we talked about home ownership a little bit earlier. Let's look at the current state of the housing market and geographic locations, right? Mm-hmm. You might have somebody in California who's like, in order for me to even just like live, I have to make over $150,000, $200,000 a year. And you look at somebody in Kansas, right? I just pulled that out of my ass, right? But Kansas, right? Maybe the cost of living is significantly less. This individual has a choice to move to Kansas, has a choice to get a job there, has a choice to potentially buy a home there. But their circle of what is normal to them, or what is home for them, is so familiar to them that the idea of picking up and leaving and going to Kansas to buy a house is so far from what is realistic, so far from what is probable, that they're going to rather likely stay in the environment that they're used to, right? Scared animals are going to always return home, right? So when we look at some of these behavioral examples in experimentation and psychology and trauma research, and we apply that to money, and we apply that to economics, we apply that to choices that people make, And even if we look at historically, and I don't want to like go off into a super tangent, but historically, when we look at the period of slavery and period following slavery and Jim Crow and the Great Migration from the South to the North, and how a lot of our families came to be in the North, and how settlement in those spaces have largely remained unchanged. Excuse me. We were having a conversation off air before we started talking. I was like, yeah, I'm still here in Connecticut. I've been here in Connecticut for 15 years, right? And what is like the only quote unquote anchor, if you will, that I have to this geographic location is my mom and my mom's household, right? But like my family is not here in Connecticut. My closest family is 2 hours away in New York. So what's keeping me from going to Dallas or Atlanta or California or even outside of the United States? It's familiarity. It's the fact that I've established home here. It's the fact that this is what has become normal for me. And so I have empathy in my trauma-informed understanding of people's psychological prisons because of what our evolutionary responses to, first of all, identifying what is safe or establishing our version of safety based off of the environment and some of the conditioning and psychosocial factors that exist influencing what our worldview looks like.
Hold on, David, before you go, because I know we've established what your definition of trauma is now, right? Now I want to ask, what was that light bulb moment or that moment of revelation where you realized I have financial trauma or I have trauma that is impacting me financially? And how did you address it? Just for anybody else who might need to identify what that looks like for them.
That's a good question. I don't know if that it was a specific moment. I think it was a series of moments as I started to socialize the phrase financial trauma, which came about when I was writing Financially Irresponsible. So I was writing Financially Irresponsible in 2019. And at the time I was reading a book by Dr. Joy DeGroy called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, where Dr. DeGroy talks about the intergenerational transfer of trauma through a lens of slavery, Jim Crow, and up through present day, right? And how our racial socialization influences not only how we engage and interact with the outside world, but our own self-esteem, how we feel about ourselves internally, or how we might feel about other Black people, or how we might socialize our children to engage in a world that we have been socialized to acknowledge, and I'm not by any means saying that this is what I believe or that this is true, but acknowledge that the more proximity you have to whiteness, the more favorable your experience is going to be, right? The more power you have.
That's just a fact, unfortunate fact of the world we live in.
Right. And so this idea of white supremacy that is so pervasive in, everything that we touch, everything that we engage with, is, what we are socialized to believe from the time that we are born, from the time that we enter into grade school, throughout our education process, throughout our employment process, right? And so when we are faced with this idea or this belief that there's something wrong with us because we are Black, or that we are inferior, or that we should be subservient, or any of these other deprecating themes that are present in our socialization, of course our self-esteem is going to be low. Of course our engagement with other Black people and our trust of other Black people are going to be low. Of course the way that we carry ourselves and the way that we express ourselves is going to be influenced by that socialization. And so I credit Dr. DeGroy's work in helping me draw parallels between racial or racist socializations and financial socializations, because I'm like, well, if trauma can be transferred intergenerationally by way of racism, then trauma can be transferred intergenerationally by way of how we engage with financial systems. And so that was the origin of my use of the term financial trauma. And as I started to socialize it and defend it with my own experiences, and eventually getting involved with organizations like the Financial Therapy Association and understanding that there's a whole field of study on how financial behavior is influenced by socialization, is influenced by our emotions, is influenced by so many of the themes that are often absent conversations around financial literacy. I was like, oh, there's academic backing to what it is that I'm suspecting or what it is that I'm experiencing. And so, to answer your question, Jalen, I think it was the combination of realizing that my experience, not that it needed to be justified or validated by academia, but that my experience in academia were pointing to the same things. And so when I was able to use that lens and that vocabulary to describe the experiences that I had growing up, including racist socializations, I was able to say, oh, that was a point of origin for a form of financial trauma, or that was a point of origin for a form of financial trauma. And in the interest of giving the audience something to kind of like chew on, I have identified 6 sources of financial trauma that I talk about in my book. And we talked about some of them already, right? So there's the genetic or generational, right? So that's happening within our body. That's happening through, just the culture of, grandma did, mom did, now I do. There's vicarious or observational, right? So what it is that I see, the environment that I grow up in. If I grow up in an environment that is poverty adjacent, even if I'm not experiencing poverty, that's going to have an influence. If I grow up in an environment that is wealth adjacent, even if I don't have wealth, that's going to have an influence. And then we could further break that down to say, what is the dissonance that I experienced growing up in a poverty adjacent environment, but not experiencing poverty? Is there shame? Is there guilt because I'm doing better than the people that I'm around? Or on the other side, what is wrong with me because I'm growing up in a wealth adjacent environment and I don't have what the people around me have? Then there is poverty or financial instability as a source, which is probably the most commonly referred to or referenced source of financial trauma. So bankruptcy, eviction, repossession, job loss, etc. There's workplace and employment trauma. So this was developed when I left my job, and part of the reason why I left my job, right? We engage in economic warfare often, especially as Black individuals, where
In corporate America, yes, sir.
we have to pretend or adopt an identity that is not necessarily consistent with the identity that we carry outside of that environment. We have to engage in fawning behaviors, which are people-pleasing behaviors in order to get promoted, in order to be noticed, in order to, et cetera, right? So absolutely a source of trauma. To have somebody who feels like they have power over you, a white man, a white woman say, you're not ready for this promotion, or you need to do this thing, or you need to like whatever, right? That can be as I'm sitting here saying it, I'm like flashing back to the experience and I'm like, damn, like, yeah, I went through that. But that can be a source of trauma. That was a source of trauma for me, right? Where it's like, I need this money to pay this mortgage, but at the same time, like, I don't want to allow this white woman to talk in my face like this, right?
To keep playing in my face like I'm stupid or something.
And you put in the work. You probably do have more of her work than she actually does, and you're the reason why she's on the pedestal.
So, so certainly workplace and employment is a source of trauma. Institutional and systemic. So we have to talk about how the origin of this country, right? The foundings of this country founded on the institution of slavery. And that's where, I talk about race theory and this idea that, white supremacy and this idea that Black people are somehow inferior to white people. And so a lot of the laws, not even just laws, but the institutions of financial systems, the credit system, et cetera, are predatory or not favorable of Black people. And then lastly is family, societal, or religious, right? And so that's where I talk about culture. Who establishes culture for you? How do you redefine culture? If you exist in a family system where your family is telling you that this is the norm, or this is what you should do, or even on the side of individuals who experience high income as a first generation high income earner, what is the expectation for you to give back, right? The black tax. What is the expectation for you to support mom or grandma or your brother or your cousin, right? And how do you establish financial boundaries in that environment? Or religious. There are a lot of people who tithe, and not that there's anything wrong with tithing, but they tithe to their detriment. And so that's an area that I spend some time on that I have to be delicate about, because black people love their Jesus. Black people love their Christianity, and so in that we have to look at not Christianity and an examination of the religious practice, but an examination of the institution of Christianity that was introduced through slavery to influence social behavior and financial behavior of Black people. And so one of the books that I reference in this book is Powernomics, where Dr. Claude Anderson talks about how the church was used to influence Black people to be subservient, to be, like people who listen and who
Docile.
Docile. That's an excellent word.
Domesticated. Those type of things.
And so certainly that's a source of financial trauma, right? Where you have people who real life experience may be facing their lights going out, and they're like, you know what, instead of giving this money to the power company, I'm going to give this money to God. And there's this prioritization of the kingdom in the afterlife and not the kingdom in this present life. And so again, not challenging anybody's specific faith, but challenging the value system that they operate under through the lens of that faith that impact their finances. And those are the 6.
Those are a good 6. And I want to say something about that last thing with the church. We say Christianity a lot, but somebody gave me a different word that I just added to my lexicon that I think more aptly describes what most of us experience, and it is churchianity, where it is about the perception and the actual optics of it versus the spiritual relationship with God and actually getting to know God on your own level and knowing the word for yourself. Is kind of taking the spoon-fed version of it and fitting and molding your life around it versus taking that own spiritual walk. And I definitely see that playing a negative role. So I appreciate you giving those 6 those 6 ways, financial trauma will show up. And one thing I want to bring back is like just with finances. I think this is a quote I actually got from you some years back. So one of the ways like with Black trauma, right? It has a direct relationship with our finances. And with Black people, it specifically shows up with our spending, our lack of savings, and our aversion to investing. Can you kind of expound on that a bit more? Like seeing how we've identified these traumas, right? But how can we work past them to get into building these positive habits?
Yeah. Man, I when you said those words back to me, I was like, I remember those words. And when I had said that, I didn't have the understanding that I do of financial trauma today, right? So, going back to that version of myself and reconciling that with my understanding of trauma today, I think that first off, I introduced a framework through this book called, I refer to as the 3 E's. 3 E's of overcoming financial trauma. The first E references exposure, which is identifying the sources of financial trauma. So, right, I give you the 6 sources of financial trauma. That is exposure. The second E is education, which talks about understanding how trauma shows up in your body, understanding the neuroscience of our stress responses, understanding that we are, or rather that our brains are looking for safety. And so in our response to a real or an imagined threat, whether we consciously acknowledging that threat or subconsciously acknowledging that threat, our body knows. And so how do you understand how your body's responses are showing up in letting you know, like, there's a threat, there's a threat, there's a threat. Within the education phase, I also talk about financial literacy, because I do think that financial literacy is important. But financial literacy is important to the extent that we understand how to navigate financial systems in order to be successful. And the unfortunate reality, and people are gonna have a field day with this, but the unfortunate reality is that the dominant financial system that we navigate, particularly in this country, is a capitalistic one, which is an exploitative system. And so while it is difficult to conceptualize a system that is not capitalistic, we have to acknowledge that in navigating capitalism, the structure of capitalism has always placed us as, in the words of Dr. Claude Anderson, not even a competitor, but the commodity, right? So when we look
With
at
just liquid capital.
Damn.
so when we look at that lens of us black people being the commodity, and then you ask me that question about why we overspend, why we don't save, why we don't invest. We're like feeding the machine, right? That's how we have been socialized, and that is not only how we have been socialized, but that is the box that we have been placed in. So you might ask me, or you might ask anybody, why do people spend? It's not just a black issue, but I'm talking about it through the lens of blackness because that's my experience and that's the audience, right? But Freud, the popular psychologist, had a nephew. I'm forgetting his name right now. But his nephew was known as the father of modern, I think, PR or advertising. Anyway, he did research and consulting for advertising agencies where, for the first time, the advertisements were not tied to the product, but were tied to the emotions of the individual. And so when we look at how advertisement has evolved over time, and in particular today, where we are, for the most part, always connected to our devices, whether that be our phones, our tablets, computers, what have you, and we're constantly being bombarded with advertisements that tell us that we need this product to look good, to be loved, to feel better, to be healthier, to sleep better, to be smarter, to be more productive, you name it, right? There's whole fields of study on not only influencing behavior, but anticipating it. And so I was reading this book, The Power of Habit, and I included a reference to The Power of Habit in my book where there's a section, the author talks about how Target specifically had done an experiment based off of data mining where they could practically predict when a woman was pregnant based off of her shopping behavior. They would know before the woman would know based off of her shopping behavior. So
That's
we
crazy.
think about how we go into these stores and we get the little cards and we, like this is all, we're giving them data and they're taking this data. And I think that this is going to become even scarier with AI, the rise of AI. We're giving them this data that they can then predict our behavior, our spending behavior, and then use that, weaponize that against us in advertisements to make us spend more.
Man, you ain't lying right now, man. Like we've been talking about AI a lot on this pod, and that's one of the drawbacks. Like we often talk about the benefits of it, but we are actively, every time you do a prompt, a query, or you're feeding it data, you're actively informing this system with how you behave, how you think, and how it can manipulate those things.
100%. 100%. And so, no, go ahead.
I just wanted to let you know I did find the nephew's name. His name is Edward L. Bernays.
Yeah.
He's the father of modern public relations. And I just wanted to go back on that too, because I remember whenever I was taking psychology, they were talking about how it's used a lot in modern marketing and modern advertisement. Because once again, if you can figure out, we've talked about this prior to, if you can figure out your target audience or your avatar, the way that they think, if you can then anticipate the things that they need to do. Like you said, if Target can say, hey, by her shopping habits, I know that she's pregnant, I can then start ramping up, hey, get these baby things because I know that her emotions are starting to come in a different play and all of these things. So now I can get you to buy and purchase all of these other things. That's just nuts to me.
Right, and to your point, we talk about avatars, right? Like you figure out the avatar of one person, like you're finding out the avatar of so many other people who have similar experiences. So, so that's weaponized against us, and in the process of that being weaponized against us, we also have to zoom out and look at the news cycles that constantly induce panic, entertainment, fear, entertainment. Like, what is the quote unquote distraction, right? People are often labeled conspiracy theorists for pointing out, okay, what is the distraction that's happening here? But these cycles of extremes in our emotional responses are often and can be used in line with the advertising, where it's like, okay, we're gonna make everybody scared so that they then go out and they buy this thing. Think about COVID and how there was no.
Everybody buying, all of the rich people are buying freaking bunkers right now.
Bro.
I remember I
During
came back from
COVID, when
Louisiana,
hand sanitizer was crazy.
but
Man, I remember my dad was on the phone with somebody. It sounded like he was doing a drug deal. It was like, hey man, hey, you got some of that? And I'm like, what y'all niggas talking about, bro? What are we talking about right
just
now?
hand sanitizer,
He
nigga.
about to drop off two packs right now. What are we talking about?
That's hilarious.
So go back to that quote when you talk about specifically Black people. When you add on the layer of racist socialization, and I want to choose my words carefully because I know how sound bites can go crazy, but when we talk about this idea of victimhood, there is a very thin line, delicate line that I think we have to walk in acknowledging that culturally we are socialized to adopt victimhood, but also that we have to acknowledge that we have been victimized. And so in that, in walking that delicate line, where we go back to the idea of choice, you have a population of people who walk in this planet, who walk in this country, who have trauma on multiple fronts, not just financial trauma, racial trauma, and all other forms of trauma, right? That are unmetabolized in their body in a dysregulated state where our minds are looking for ways to establish safety. And sometimes the way or the easiest way for us to establish safety is by spending. Sometimes the easiest way for us to establish safety is by saving. Sometimes the easiest way for us to establish safety is by hoarding, right? But on the spending front,
I was just about to say, I do have a question though.
yeah,
How is the spending front equating to me feeling safe, right? What is that connection or that correlation?
great question. So, dopamine is the short answer, right? I spend my money to buy weed or cigarettes, right? I spend my money to buy lottery tickets. I spend my money to buy alcohol. I spend my money on pornography. I spend my money on gambling. I spend my money on clothes, shoes, jewelry, right? The dopamine is what we're really spending for, but its expression is going to vary based off of socialization, right? Based off of the environment that we're in. And this is not just true of poor people, right? This is true of people who have high income. This is true of people who have assets. Where you think about just look on social media, right? You think about the lifestyle marketing that we have witnessed over the last 5 years. The clothes, the cars, the jewelry that people have purchased, the houses, the Airbnbs, whatever. We even have turned financial education into a business. Well, I'm not gonna say we have turned it into a business, but the business of financial education has been I'm gonna just say
It's grown tremendously over the last 5 years.
it's grown, and
I would locate even say been over commoditized.
yes, that's the word that I was looking for. It has been commoditized in such a way that we get a dopamine response by engaging in financial products and services because we feel like. So this is me resurfacing.
Just buying that product is gonna be the key to the promised land.
But how is it
Well,
marketed?
we back to personal prayer packages.
How is it marketed to us? Generational wealth, right?
Yeah, like like this is a magic pill solution. Take this one course, learn this piece of information, and your financial situation will change because of it.
100%.
Like I said, it's going back to how you kind of drew that parallel with the church earlier. It's like we're back to those scamming pastors with the personal prayer packages. Like we
100%.
can't be selling one size fits all solutions to unique situations.
100%. So that's how people spend as a fight response, right? When we look at the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, spending is a fight response. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the story. I forget what the business was. I think it might have been FedEx, where the owner was getting ready like to face bankruptcy.
There was it is FedEx. So yeah, he had $5,000 left. Instead of paying his because he was over on his fuel bill. Instead of paying on his fuel bill, went to Vegas, gambled it. He did make enough money. He actually was up, but ended up losing it. Came back, won again, then flew back to Memphis and paid his fucking fuel bill.
Yeah, but
I
FedEx
never
is
heard
still
that.
around.
That's crazy.
You never heard that? Yeah,
I never heard. That's insane. Bro got balls of steel.
That was a fight response. He was like, I'm gonna fight this. But sometimes in some people's minds, particularly people who don't have access to resources or who don't have access to information, their fight response may look a lot more passive. And so the aversion to saving may look like proclivity to spending because I'm fighting for my life right now. Like, I've heard the argument, and I've made the argument in my uninformed past where you bought the iPhone, but you could have put the money into Apple stock, right? That is not trauma informed, right? That's accusatory. That's blaming the individual because first of all, we have to look at the utility of the iPhone. What can that product do for you as an individual? But we also have to look at is the money that I spend on buying an iPhone going to change my life in the next year, in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? If I only put the money that I was going to spend on an iPhone into Apple stock, so I buy $1,000 worth or $1,500 worth of Apple stock, is that going to change my life in the next year, 5 years? And we have to think about the fact that people are navigating a survival mode of like right now. What can I do right now to feel better? What can I do right now to take the edge off? What can I do right now to survive? And this is how the rise of YOLO culture came about, right? People are not wanting to just like, oh, we only live once, so I'm just gonna put it all on the line and but there are people who are out there who believe that they will not make it to retirement age. There are people out there who do not believe that they'll even make it to our age, right? And so why am I gonna save? Why am I gonna invest for retirement when I'm not gonna be able to benefit from that money? And these are not only markers of financial trauma, but they are survival responses. And so when individuals, and it's not going to be all individuals, but individuals like me, individuals in my space around financial therapy, around financial healing, are addressing or consulting on these issues, we have to look at the root cause and not what is the behavior, because the behavior is just a symptom, right? We have to look at why are people feeling pushed into these environments or into these spaces where they're making these choices. And then what can we provide by way of resources or relief that allows for them to make more informed decisions.
That's good. So that does make me want to kind of can we play a little game, a role play game? You're a financial therapist. So like, look, I'm a client. I got heavy retail therapy. That's what I do to spend to kind of self-regulate myself, right? I love to buy high fashion. That's what I do. How would you walk me through this is what I need to do to kind of like come out of that state, or I guess lessen the self I don't even know what the term would be, but how would you do that?
First question I ask when I work with people is, what does money represent to you?
That's a good one. That's a
So,
good
so
question.
that's me asking you, what does money represent to you?
A good time, man. Money just let me do what I need to do. It let me flex. Yeah.
If you had to pick one word to describe what does money represent to you, what would that word be?
That's hard because I want to answer as my true self.
No, stay in, bro. Stay in, bro.
I know.
I'll tell you this, right? When I ask this question, I usually get one of three answers, right? Money represents freedom, money represents power, money represents security. Those are like the top answers that I get when
The
people.
first answer it came my word was power. That was the word that came in my head. So that's crazy.
I
And
would probably say freedom.
so my response to that question is then power to do what? Or freedom to do what? Right? Or safety from what?
The freedom to buy whatever I want to buy, the freedom to do whatever I want to do, the freedom to go ahead and buy these clothes that I like to buy, the freedom for me to go ahead and buy this car that I want to drive.
So then we dig deeper, right? And then we figure out, okay, well, why do you feel like you're not able to do that on a more modest budget, right? Like, obviously, you don't have those things right now, so you're looking to get those things. Why, like, what's stopping you from being able to realize freedom in less expensive items?
Because I rather choose quality. I rather choose this designer. It feel better. The fabric's softer.
You need them Egyptian thread, them 4,000 count sheets, man.
So in a real life situation, right? I'll go back and forth with the individual for a few times before realizing. And I'll pull a real example of this conversation that I had. I had a conversation with a woman. She was in her 50s. She had an almost adult son, and when I asked her that question, and she was kind of like following the same pattern that you were following, talking about freedom. She was approaching retirement age, and she was like, "I want to retire." And she's like, "I know that I don't have any money saved. Like, I know that that's not going to happen." I said, "Well, what does retirement look like for you?" And she's like, "The ability to travel. She wants to be able to travel." And I was like, "What's stopping you from being able to travel right now?" And she's like, pauses, and she's thinking about it, and she's like, "I am." And I said, "Powerful realization, right?" I said, "Because you could go on a like day trip, right? You could jump on a train or a bus, or you could get on a plane. If you set up a budget and you put money away in a certain way, like you could do that. So what's stopping you from doing that right now?" I am, right? And so in these sessions when I work with people, one of the things that is a priority for me to establish in that conversation, outside of understanding what money represents to them, is also what is their value system. So even going back to you and the character that you were just in, right? This individual is talking about they want freedom to do. When I'm hearing that they want freedom to do, I'm also hearing that they feel restricted in their everyday life. When they talk about, they want to prioritize designer, they want to feel better, they want to whatever, right? The clothes feels better on them. I think that that's a cognitive distortion, right? It's just like you think that it feels better because you're spending more money on it. Like, yeah, of course you're gonna think that it feels better, but if I go and I say, well, the same retailer who is creating the clothes for Louis Vuitton is creating the clothes for Walmart, and so there's no difference in quality, right? Then what is your response? You're spending more money on Louis. You're spending more money on the name. But we know that the cost of creating this product is the same. It's coming from the same place. It's just a different label being placed on it. And so when I start confronting the individual, and not in an aggressive way, but confronting the individual with their own words, then I get to be able to dig down into like what is it really that you're trying to solve for by spending your money. And this is just based off of my experience, but individuals who are signaling with their wealth by way of material items might be looking for external validation, or they might be looking to escape like a version of like they escape a version of themselves, a past version of themselves. Right? Because I couldn't have, or because I didn't have then, I need to be able to have now. I deserve this now. And then changing the lens on the individual that I'm speaking to, right? Maybe the individual that I'm speaking to is not an individual who struggled with money, or who struggles with money, but struggled with money in the past, and now they have money, right? So it's not nothing for them to spend this money on this item, but they are now so focused on keeping up with their peers, where it's like, well, I'm in this environment and everybody else got this, so I want to have this too. Or if you got this level of quality, I want to have the next level of quality. And so understanding, and again, we're not looking at the outcome, we're looking at the root cause. If you have the money to spend on these things, cool. But also understand why you're spending the money on these things. That's what's important, right? I'm not here to tell people what to do with their money. I'm here to help people understand why they do what they do with money. And a lot of times the why is informed by trauma.
That's good. That's man. So with that, right? I'm thinking about it. With you are helping identify that root cause. Once they've identified the why, what are some ways or strategies to help build that path forward for that healing process, and helping build up that resilience to make sure you don't relapse? Because that's also a thing. We can
100%.
make a quick change and then double back and go back to what's comfortable real easy.
Yeah, so talked about exposure phase and the 3 E's, talked about education. The last phase is execution. In the execution phase, one of the first things that I prioritize is helping the individual rewrite their money narrative, right? So what is the message that you tell yourself about money? I actually had an experience where I worked with a financial therapist who helped me realize that one of the money narratives that I was carrying, this is as recent as this year, one of the money narratives that I was carrying was that I was a good manager of money. Not necessarily a bad thing. However, when that money narrative bumped up against my experience as an entrepreneur, I believed that I was a better manager of money than I was somebody who can generate income or make money. Right? So
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
So when we were in our session, I went back to my childhood and how I pride myself on being able to exist as this administrative kind of like arm of my mom's household, and being able to manage the budget of the food stamps and being able to, do all of these things. I was very proud of that, and that translated into my financial behavior as an adult when I was in my working world, when I could count on a paycheck every other week, right? And so when I was employed, I was a great manager of money because I learned how to manage money as a child through socialization. But in that environment, I never learned how to go out and make money outside of like going to get a job. And I realized that I had a resistance, almost kind of like a disdain for this idea of hustling. So it's like, I'm not gonna go out and hustle. Like I'm not gonna go out and be the dude doing Uber. Like I'm not gonna go out and be the dude selling CDs on the corner. And not that there's anything wrong with those things, but in my mind, I did not like the process of the hustle. And part of that was rooted in the fact that I believed that I was a better manager of money, and that being a better manager of money was better or somehow morally superior than being a generator of money. As an entrepreneur, though, if you don't have no money to manage, then being a good manager of money is not going to
It
serve you.
don't mean a damn thing.
Hey,
Let's talk about it.
because look,
'Cause
entrepreneur broke and job broke is two different
this
brokes.
is a conversation I wanted to get into with you, right? Because we hear it's funny because of the space that we're in, right? We got into the financial space, the content creator financial space, when a lot of this was kind of like on the cusp, right? A lot of these things weren't being talked about on the regular, or it was right pre-pandemic, right before it was a really, really huge explosion. And you heard a lot of go get a job, go start your business, leave your job, do all of these things. It's referred to as the Great Resignation of 2021. What was your biggest lesson? Was that your biggest lesson, is that I'm not a good generator of the money? Or what was your biggest lesson that you learned since transitioning full time?
Man, I don't know if I could boil it down to one. Because like I said, that realization came as a result of having a financial therapy session where I was on the other side of the financial therapy, right? So I'm receiving the financial therapy. And David, you asked me a question I didn't fully answer, so I'm gonna answer it with this response. I'm intentional about everything that I do, and a part of my intentionality is also fueled by my integrity. Integrity is a value of mine. So I felt that it would be an incomplete experience for me to write a book about financial trauma as an expert, pulling on clinical and academic insights, pulling on my own lived experiences, but not having gone through the process of receiving financial therapy. Like, that would be a huge miss. So I reached out to a financial therapist, buddy of mine, who I trusted, and I was like, "Look, like, I want to have a session." What's great about this particular financial therapist, shout out to Stephen Hughes, is that he integrates Reiki with his practice. So as we have conversations that are narrative driven,
That's the sounds, right? Reiki is the sounds.
Reiki is an energy healing practice.
Okay.
A lot of times it is offered in connection with like massage, or it is offered in connection with sounds. But it's an energy healing practice, and so we did it
Gotcha.
long distance. But really, what Reiki does is it goes through the chakras and it clears energetic blockages. So when we're talking about healing trauma, going back to one of my original points around trauma not being just a psychological event, but a body event, there has to be a component of somatics that is involved in loosening and releasing that trauma. And so I interviewed Stephen, and he's the only person that I interviewed for the book, where I use his words directly to speak to the audience. But in talking about how do we help individuals move through financial trauma and overcome financial trauma, part of it is rewriting their money narrative. So understanding what are the stories they tell themselves about money, and allowing them or helping them to realize that they can tell themselves a different story. So in my example, it was, I am a good manager of money, but I'm not a good generator of money. The next part is helping individuals set financial boundaries, because a lot of times it's kind of like, on sitting on a river with a hole in your boat, right? Like, it's a leaky ship. A lot of times with people, particularly first generation high income earners, come to a space where they have more than maybe their parents did, maybe anybody in their family did. They're constantly being hit up for money, and they have to wrestle with the shame or the guilt of either saying no or overgiving, because they didn't put on their oxygen mask first. And so establishing financial boundaries is important. And how do we reinforce those financial boundaries is by building community. So David, to your point, right? The likelihood of relapse based off of survival, based off of conditioning, based off of, again, going back to the study with the mice, scared animals return home. Home is not just a physical place, right? Home is also a condition.
Mhm.
And so when I'm talking about healing financial trauma, building community is a big part of the healing step. And community can look like a community of financial professionals that include coaches, planners, financial therapists, etc. The community could also look like what you all have built, right? It can look like the podcast community. It can look like I have a Substack newsletter where people like listen to what I write, or rather read what I write. It can look like group sessions with individuals who are like-minded. One of the ideas that I like to emphasize in the establishment of community is that the values have to be aligned, and also that you have the ability to not only create culture, but to like dictate and offer that to other people, right? And so when we talk about doing things for the culture, we have to examine who gave us that culture, and is this culture harmful or helpful, right? If the culture is harmful, then we have the ability and the choice to abandon it. If the culture is helpful but it's just uncomfortable, how do we reconcile with that discomfort and make sure that it is still in alignment with our values by way of leaning on other people who are going through what we're going through, right? So establishing a good support system. And then lastly, I think most importantly, is the financial therapy and the somatics piece. So not everybody is going to go out and get trained in financial therapy, and that's cool. But there are people who are dedicated to the practice of financial therapy. It's an emerging field. And so there are resources out there. There's educational programs out there. The Financial Therapy Association is one. They have a directory of financial therapists that you can filter down based off of your preferences. So that might be, you might want a Black financial therapist. You might want a financial therapist who is more mental health leaning. You may want a financial therapist who is more financial leaning. So you get to dictate what that looks like. But the practice of financial therapy is ultimately designed to help align your emotions, your feelings with your relationship with money. And then on the other side of that, the somatic piece is working on metabolizing the trauma that's in your body. So that can be breath work, that can be affirmations, that can be dance, that can be martial arts, that can be Reiki, that could be yoga, that could be working out. But it has to be an intentional focus on how do you get to the areas in your body where you're carrying trauma, and then how do you loosen that. And so there are somatic practicing somatic practicing professionals who have specific training in somatic healing. I do not currently have specific trainings in somatic healing, but I can guide somebody through like a breathwork exercise, or I can guide somebody through a mindfulness activity, or I can make a referral to a Reiki master teacher, or and this is something that I do myself. Like when I'm working out, like when I go to the gym, we was kind of joking about this before we got on air. When I go to the gym, in my 30s, it's less about the vanity and more about like working through the stuff, right? Whether that be psychologically, whether that be just making sure that I'm getting my reps in and able to move my body the way that I do. I talk about how I practice Wing Chun Kung Fu in the book. So Kung Fu is also a form of somatic healing. But there's a huge focus on mindfulness. And I think that mindfulness piece is so important because oftentimes when we're navigating high stress environments that are contributing to anxiety, that are contributing to depression, that are contributing to this dysregulated state, and how do I spend my money, save my money, hoard my money, etc. It's because we're not reminding ourselves, or we're not safe. We don't feel safe in our body. So I was going to say we're not reminding ourselves of our safety, but we may not feel safe. And so when we practice mindfulness, we can go into our body and say, okay, in this moment, I am not experiencing an immediate threat. Because again, to the science of, or rather to the neuroscience, the science of the brain does not have the ability to distinguish between a real or imagined threat. So if you are stressing out about a bill that is due that you can't pay, or you're stressing out about a bill that's coming due that you can't pay, you are your body is going to start responding to this threat, because evolutionary, like it doesn't have a choice. It's like, okay, there's an issue. Like, how do we solve this? And so that's where you start going into feeling anxious. That's where you start going into the panic attack. That's where you go into waking up in the middle of the night at a cold sweat. You have to go into your body. And I'm trying to like sound as less like metaphysical and woo-woo as possible and just focus purely on the somatic piece of it. But you have to go into the body and recognize.
I'm gonna cut you off right there because I do love what you're saying right now, but I did want to just speak about like that entrepreneur part. And the reason why I had brought up that entrepreneur part is because as I'm speaking to you, I've realized that I have financial trauma with entrepreneurship. So
Yep.
I kind of wanted to get your perspective with it and see if you've developed any trauma with it. Because I'll just say this from me. I know for sure David probably feels the same way. But for me, I exited so early to pursue full-time entrepreneurship. Now I'm not gonna lie to you. I feel like the current space of where I'm at right now, I probably could be further if I did deal with that financial trauma, right? Because jumping off the porch so early, there were things that I did where it's like, I slept on one of my frat brothers' couches for a little while just to pursue business, right? There are times where I'm working 18 hours a day, like barely eating or whatever, just to pursue this. Yes, like no pay, nothing. And now it goes to that scare animals return home. I return to that workforce, and I am putting up with things where I'm like, man, I really hate being here. I really hate this fucking job. I really hate listening to these motherfuckers telling me about all of this shit. But at the same time, it's more comfortable because it allows me to provide for my family. So I kind of want to speak to some of those things. How come weren't you a scared animal returning home, returning back to the banking industry, which you've built yourself up into?
That's a hell of a question. Or a hell of a series of questions. So first question you asked, did I experience financial trauma through entrepreneurship? 100%. 100%. Like there's no beating around the bush with that. How come I wasn't a scared animal to return home? I wanted to on many instances. I think that what I just walk you through in terms of like the steps to financial healing is also part of my experience as well. It's not to say that I was immune, right, to the feelings of anxiety or the feelings of like, oh my God, I need to like. I have applied for jobs. I have been offered jobs and I have turned down jobs. I'll tell you a quick story, and I tell the story in the book as well. This is shortly after I left my job, maybe 2022. I was approached by a recruiter. When I left my job, I was making $78,000 a year. Like you, jumped off the porch early. I was a part of Great Recession, May of 2021. Did not know what the hell I was doing. Did not know what the hell I was going to do. I just assumed that if I became known, that people will come to me, and that people coming to me,
if you build it, they will come.
Right, exactly. So I'm approached by a recruiter for a position. The position was for a small credit union local to me, for a director of marketing position. And she's like, yeah, the marketing team is a team of one, so it would just be you. The pay was, or rather, the pay range was 100 to 110,000 a year, I think. So like the infamous six figures. And she was very impressed with what I was able to build since I left my job, with my social presence, with Forbes, with the publication, other publications and stuff. And she's like, so what do you think about this? And I was like, well, here's a couple of questions that I have for you. The pay, okay, we could talk about. She's like, this is the issue that I'm having with filling this role is that it's a in-person position, like it's no fully remote. And I'm like, I could negotiate with that, right? Because it was in Hartford, so not too far from me. I said, here's my question. Will I be able to continue doing what I'm doing in terms of building my brand? Because that was part of the reason why I left in the first place. She goes, well, the hiring manager is really going to want the individual who fills this role to focus primarily on the marketing for the organization. So
anytime they start that answer with that, well, you already know some bullshit behind it. Well,
I said that's a non-negotiable for me. That's a non-negotiable for me. So long story short, like it didn't go anywhere. And after I got off the phone with her, I called my dad and I'm like, I need you to tell me that I'm not crazy for turning down this position. Like this position was everything that I wanted when I was working, right? Like this is the dream position. The other side of the story, and the reason why I called my dad to tell me that I wasn't crazy was because I had gotten the mail that day before I had got on a call with her. And in the mail, I had a repossession letter from my vehicle. I was leasing my vehicle at the time, and I had missed like 2 or 3 payments. So I'm like, I gotta pay this car note. And this woman is offering me this role, or basically offering me this role that's paying over 6 figures. And I told her no. Like, am I bugging? And my dad goes, son, you might have bigger balls than I do.
But there has to be a level of self-belief too when it comes to entrepreneurship. That is definitely a huge aspect of it.
And you know, that experience was a tough experience, and even now, like, I still wrestle with, was it the right decision? Not because I didn't believe it was the right decision in terms of my integrity, in terms of my values, but because of the fact that financially I could have avoided a lot of pain that came after that if I had that money coming in. But what would I've had to trade off, right? And so when I look at what it is that I've been able to accomplish by way of recognition, by way of the awards that I've gained, by way of the authority that I've established, by way of the fact that I'm even writing this book, right? Like, I've written books in the past, but to be approached by a publisher, like my publisher is Wiley, right? So
What? Yeah. What? I was about to after you finish this point, I want to talk about that. What was that like?
To have my book go with a traditional publisher that is as known as like Wiley is an academic publisher. They write textbooks. They write Grant Cardone's 10x rules with Wiley. Like, this is this is a heavy hitter. I don't think that would have happened. I don't think that I would have gotten the Forbes column. I don't think so many things awarded by the Financial Therapy Association, awarded by the AFCPE. And not that the awards like make up for the money that I've missed out on, but the deep expertise and authority that I've built by just like keeping my head down and staying focused, even in the moments where I experienced doubt. The question, well, why was I not a scared animal that returned home? In a lot of ways, like I burnt, at least in my mind, I burnt the bridge to go back home, right? When I was very loud and public about my departure from corporate America, like I fired my boss, and
that's it. Yeah, you can't go back.
Like, could I have pulled some strings? Maybe, but like, to your point, Jalen, like, would I have been in an environment where they would have held that shit over my head? Probably. Like, they would have made me dance for that position.
Yeah.
And I think the trauma of my workplace and employment was just so much stronger than the trauma of navigating the hardships of entrepreneurship. And so
That's
to
good.
give you a really
That's heavy.
super deep and profound answer, right? Maybe corporate America was not home to begin with. Right? So like you say, why didn't I return home? Like, it wasn't home. And it never felt like home.
It was a capture state. You was a POW out there. Once you got a chance, burn no bridge, we ain't coming back. Hey, I feel you. That's where Jalen, you know, you kind of spoke to it just a little bit with our journeys and how we went full-time entrepreneurship back into the workforce. I do feel those emotions, you know what I'm saying? Those feelings, and it doesn't feel like home. It comes back to one of the words that we had at the beginning, choice. There's all these other things around your choices that we discussed throughout this episode, you know, a lot of the social, emotional factors. I just think this has been a very good conversation for me. I think I'm going to have to listen back on this one and really like kind of unpack some things when it comes to my experience with entrepreneurship, because at this current juncture, right, we're in a space where it's comfortable in the workforce, and we don't want to be there. We don't want to be there because it's predictable. Yeah. It's extremely predictable. Like I kind of said it jokingly earlier, 9 to 5 broke and entrepreneur broke are two different things. 9 to 5 broke, you broke till that next paycheck. Entrepreneur broke, you don't know
Nigga,
how
you
long you gonna be down.
you broke to the next client.
You in here just praying, like, man, if I can make
Lord,
it to
Jesus.
next month, Lord, please.
Yeah.
I got taxes on my ass.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
a different level of stress, but I think kind of talking about, scared animals return home. You have to find comfort in that uncertainty. You have to find ways to have faith is the word that I always come back to.
Yes.
You have to have a unshakable, unwavering faith that things are going to work out and that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing. So I just want to say that to say again, I commend you, brother, for staying on the path, because the work you're doing is impacting people in such a positive way. And I believe that this book is going to be something that's going to be very important and something that many of us, it'll help us unpack things that we didn't even understand we were holding in.
100%.
So speaking of the book, Overcoming Financial Trauma,
Yes, sir.
the book comes out in November.
November 12th.
November 12th, published through Wiley. So where can listeners of the show, can they pre-order? Can they purchase now? Is it available? Let us know how we could get tapped in with that.
Yeah, so pre-orders are active. You could go on Amazon, you could go to Barnes and Noble, you could do it through, I believe, Bookshop, Books a Million. Really, like all of the traditional retailers should have it up. And that's one of the to your question, Jalen. That's one of the benefits of working with a publisher is that the distribution network is so wide. I'm not just like peddling books through Amazon or through my own devices. So um, yeah, any readers who are interested in grabbing it, the book is going to be a hardcover. Some of the questions that I've gotten recently is there going to be a audio version? That's something that me and the publisher discussed, but I think they're prioritizing the physical copies first. Um, I have an aggressive pre-order goal, so I'm hoping to hit that goal. But what's funny about your question, Jalen, specifically as it relates to corporate, is that now I'm viewing corporate as a potential client, right? So part of my marketing strategy, my sales strategy with the book is to approach corporate buyers and offer this book as a resource to employee resource groups and or their larger employee body, because financial wellness is a trending topic in a lot of employer like offerings. And so if I could help the employer recognize that, hey, your employees may be navigating financial trauma, and the source of trauma may be this place of employment. Here are ways that we can identify and work through that. Oh, and by the way, I'm available to offer consulting around building and improving your financial wellness program. And so that's kind of like the area that I have transitioned into. We talk about 2021 Rakim looking at working with individuals one-on-one to 2025 Rakim, like now it's definitely one-to-many in a B2B capacity.
Love it.
I love it. I love it,
Because
my
you can
brother.
impact more people on that B2B scale. And I know you just mentioned you had that aggressive pre-order goal. I just have to say I went ahead and pre-ordered the book myself right now. I would
Appreciate
show it on the screen, but I can't be putting my address on the interwebs. People might come find me. I don't need that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But yeah, man, that is, yeah, I'm excited for this
Yeah, I
one.
need a pre-order mine. I'm gonna have to ship it to you though. I need a signature in there, man.
For sure. I'll definitely do that.
Got you.
Indeed. Well,
You had
Jalen,
anything
man,
else, David?
nah, man, this has been phenomenal, bro. This
Yeah.
has been a great conversation. Just from the holistic standpoint of it, been good to catch up with you, Rakim. So for
Definitely.
the new listeners that haven't gotten a chance or they don't follow you, can you just let them know how they can find you on socials if they do want to work with you? Or I know you just mentioned you're transitioning your business now to more of a B2B capacity. If there is someone in a position that wants to work with you to help bring your expertise to their organization, just plug yourself in, let them know how they can get tapped in.
For sure. So all my social medias is my name at Rakim Sabree. Substack is really the best way to get in contact with me because it comes straight to my email. So rakimsabree.substack.com. And the name of my Substack is also Overcoming Financial Trauma. So there's a ton of resources already up there if you want to get familiar with me and my work. But outside of Substack, There's LinkedIn. I'm also very active in. So for any other corporate people or corporate facing people, you can definitely find me on LinkedIn at LinkedIn /n/ Rahkim Sabree. And again, plugging up the book, Overcoming Financial Trauma, hits stores November 12th, 2025. Definitely pre-order now anywhere books are sold.
Definitely.
Y'all,
Man.
please go get that book. Y'all go get it.
I got mine November 18th.
If y'all haven't already pre-ordered it, I'm gonna pre-order mine as well. Can't wait to read it. Rakim, once again, like David said, man, this was amazing getting to really just catch up with you, hear about all the things from your journey. I'm just excited for you, excited to see this book released for you. I know you're going to surpass those pre-order goals, man. And if there's anything that we can do to help you, if you're going on a book tour, you stopping in Houston, whatever we need to do, if we need to do an event or some shit, let us know.
Might have to make a stop in Texas for sure.
Bet.
That is a bet. Well, again, Rakim, man, we want to thank you so much for joining us, brother. We're going to just get into a couple of house-cleaning items before we get up out of here. Everybody, as always, we want to thank you for tuning in and week out to the show. If you gotten value from this episode, y'all let us know. Leave a rating, leave a review. We love to get feedback from you all. It really does help us grow the show and continue to push out this message. And realistically, man, it put that battery in your boy back, man. I like to hear when y'all tell us what we doing, because every now and again, man, these entrepreneurial journeys, we be getting low, dog, and be feeling like, man, what's the point of it all? And then it's that one little push from somebody like, man, let's keep going. Let's go hard.
All you need is a spark, man. Spark to fuel into a flame.
That's it. Just one little ember. That's all we need. So y'all do y'all part. Keep throwing these embers onto this, and we're going to just burn this fire of financial literacy and this financial revolution and renaissance in the community. Having real conversations like these are what we strive to do with the platform. It's ways that we can actively address and improve, because a lot of times we focus so much on strategy. We don't talk about the emotional, social aspects of it, and these are just as important. So again, Rakim, thank you for joining us. Everybody, Jalen, I'm gonna let you close us out with our Black Wealth prayer.
Gotcha. God, align us with our purpose. Bless us with your favor in all areas of our lives, spiritually, mentally, physically, financially, and emotionally. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen, amen, and amen. As I always say, y'all, from his lips to God's ears. And until next time, y'all stay black, stay beautiful, stay wealthy. This is BWR signing out. Peace.